So let's see how this works in PyCharm. It turns out that PyCharm has great support for source code control systems integrated right into the system, including support for Git, which is nice. PyCharm actually uses the other general term called VCS, version control system, but I've used SCCS my whole life, so that's what I'm going to call it. But in PyCharm, there is a menu called VCS, which has all kinds of stuff, and we're going to look at that in just a second. Let's look at the code we've been developing. I just have this in a test directory, but right now, this is just a set of files on my disk. Let's make a Git repository out of this. Well, what we can do is go to VCS and say import into version control. That's we want to take our files and put them into version control. And it knows about lots of different kinds. I mentioned it. It knows about CVS and Mercurial and Subversion, but we're going to put it onto Git. So we're going to create a Git repository right on this computer. So select a directory where the new Git repository will be created. We can just store it right in the same directory that our source code is. It'll actually create a hidden directory called .git and put everything in there. You won't even really see it unless you know how to look for system files. And it changed the color of these to red because it's telling us these are important source code files that aren't being managed by Git, so we better add them. It also added some little icons on top of here for our VCS. First thing we want to do is select our 3 files and add them. We can just right click and there's a new menu called Git and say add, and it will add these files. They're now green, meaning that they have been added to our source code control system, but they haven't been checked in yet. They've been modified. So let's go and put them in. We can just click on this green up arrow, which basically says commit our changes. It asks us to type in a comment. I'm going to say new check-in, commit, and it gives us a little pop-up here, 3 changes committed, new check-in. There's a little tab here if I want, where I can click on this and see in more detail exactly what happened. And now they're back to white. Great. Now let's suppose that we wanted to go through and modify something. Oh, I notice I've got a little squiggly underlines under class because I don't have my 2 blank lines before each class definition like I'm supposed to. So I'm going to press return, and as soon as I do that, notice the grid changes to blue. That means that we have locally modified the file that are not saved in the repository. So let's save those. We do our changes. Maybe we are going to run our code, make sure it still works, looks good. Let's check this in, or rather use the language of Git, which is commit. Add in a new comment. We'll just say some blank lines. Just a very, very short comment saying what you're doing is useful, because that way when you have a whole long history of check-ins, you can see what it was you're doing, and that will remind you which version this might be. Commit, and boom, grid, it's now white again. It got committed. Let's just make another couple changes. Let's add some comments. So we'll say this is our base class, and this is our food subclass, and this is our simulation class. All right, let's check all this in. We'll add a comment, which is added comments. Commit. All right, that's all done. Now, what can we do with all of these changes? It's actually turned out to be really cool. Now, let's see what we can do with Git. If we click on our directory and click on the VCS menu, there's a new Git submenu, and there's all kinds of stuff we can do, including show history. Show history will show us all of our actions, all of our commits, and all of our check-ins and stuff like that. And we can click on one of these, and it will tell us what happened. Oh, we did something to grid. And if we click on grid, it actually gives us this beautiful visual indication of exactly how it changed. This on the left is how it was originally, and this on the right is how it was changed. We inserted in green these blank lines. Okay, that's pretty cool. Well, what's this one about? Well, we also modified grid. In this case, green is on the comments that we inserted. Okay, that's nice. So let's go to grid, and now that we're editing grid, if we go to VCS, we can now say some other things. We can compare with the same repository version, compare with the latest repository version, or compare with anything else. So compare with the latest repository version is great if you want to see how have I changed this code since the last time I checked in. Or we can say compare with, say, 2 versions ago, and it will tell us exactly what we've done. So you can play around with it, but the main thing that we're going to be doing is checking in code so that we have versions, and if we ever want to, we can easily see how we changed and roll back to an earlier version. One other thing that is really nice about Git is that we can not only store our repositories on our local machine, but we can also store our repositories on a remote machine, on a server. And GitHub does that, right? GitHub is a company that provides hosting for Git repositories. And one of the reasons the open source community likes it is that Git made a very clever strategic decision, which is they provide their service completely for free if you make your code open source. So let's go look at the GitHub website. Of course, I have an account. I'm going to be asking all of you to make free accounts yourself. I'm going to click on my account, look at the repositories I'm involved with, and notice I have a repository that I manage called Paths to CS Public, and this is sample code for this class. In fact, all of the code that I show in the videos, I post publicly on GitHub, and so you can extract this, right? Check it out and get access to all of the code examples yourself. So if you want to go look at what we did in M3, we can actually have this nice web interface for looking at this, and we can go look at the print triangle example, and there it is. Or we can go back to GitHub and check this out. So we can go, here, let's close our PyCharm windows. And notice one of the quick start items is check out from version control. We can check out from GitHub. Now, I'm already logged in, so it connected. If you weren't logged in, it'll ask you for your credentials, so you'll have to make a GitHub account. And then asks you for the Git repository URL. Well, if we go back here to Path to CS Public, right over here is the URL. So we can come over here and paste that URL in and click Clone, and it will check out that entire repository, put it on your disk wherever you want, and whenever you want to update it, you'll be able to update it with that little pull thing inside of PyCharm. Whenever I make changes to the code, you can feel free to do that. And in fact, since this is a public repository, if you want to modify the code, there is a process for doing that as well.